would be M20, M50, M standing for methanol, 50 standing for 50% methanol, 50% gasoline. So, but you will not be able to make an M50 simply because you're not going to be able to dissolve as much methanol in gasoline. We do know that methanol causes blindness, therefore it is a toxic compound, so there are concerns about large scale usage of methanol in cars, and it is a little bit more corrosive than ethanol, and so it will corrode your car parts. So those are some of the disadvantages. Now let's talk about how it is made. Methanol is usually produced from something called synthesis gas. Synthesis gas is a mixture of carbon monoxide and hydrogen. How do you make the carbon monoxide and hydrogen? Generally, you take coal, which we will put as C, and react it at very high temperatures, around 700 to 1000 degrees C, along with a little bit of water. It will produce carbon monoxide and hydrogen, which is your synthesis gas. This process is called gasification. Once you have the synthesis gas, you need the specific ratio of carbon monoxide to hydrogen. A ratio of hydrogen to carbon monoxide 1:2 can actually be used to produce synthetic gasoline. Indeed, this type of process was used to produce gasoline during restrictions in South Africa during apartheid, when they couldn't import oil. It was also used during World War II to produce some energy. So this is synthetic gasoline. If you shift the ratio of hydrogen to carbon monoxide, you make it a 2:1 ratio the other way around, and the way you do this type of switch is using Le Chatelier's principle. Equilibrium can shift that ratio, and so that is a very interesting chemical process. Then you need to actually use a catalyst. Usually this is a copper zinc oxide. There are different types of catalysts, different efficiencies, things like that, and a lot of research goes into what types of catalyst could be used and how to make this process more efficient. You could get methanol. So you could get the H2 and CO from fossil fuels, and therefore this would make it a non-renewable way of producing methanol. But similar to methanol, you could also use biomass to produce the synthesis gas. So instead of using a fossil fuel, if you burn the biomass, you will get the same H2 and CO. And you could also use solar energy to produce H2 and CO. So these are the two renewable routes to methanol. So again, methanol can be either renewable or non-renewable depending upon how it is generated. And how is it generated? You make the synthesis gas, and then in a 2:1 ratio, hydrogen to carbon monoxide, you are going to get methanol. And the methanol can be used to power vehicles. Indeed, methanol is being used currently to power all vehicles in Indy 500. You could use peanut oil, sunflower oil, etc. also to power sort of diesel engines. In fact, the first diesel engines were designed to be powered by peanut oil, but was considered to be too expensive at that time and therefore never actually pursued. You could use straight vegetable oils, and there are buses and things that right now run on waste oil. I have posted a Mythbusters that actually shows that just putting filtered waste oil into your diesel engine will make it work. But over time, this is not a good idea because it will cause engine problems due to incomplete combustion. And there are unsaturated hydrocarbons in these used vegetable oils or even straight vegetable oils, and they will polymerize even just sitting there in your engine to produce gums that will then plug your filters and injectors. You do not want this. The other problem with straight vegetable oils is that viscosity. Viscosity is the ability to flow, and so if it is very viscous, it's not going to flow very easily. One way to address this problem is to increase temperature. And so usually in vehicles that run on straight vegetable oils, you have two tanks, one having gasoline. And so until the temperature increases in your engine, the vehicle will run on gasoline. After the temperature increases and the viscosity of your straight vegetable oil has decreased, the vegetable oil will be used to run the vehicle. The other problem is that, yes, it's too viscous. Yes, you're going to have engine problems. Yes, you're going to have gums, but also purity. It's not very pure. It contains other substances that you really don't want. So instead of using straight vegetable oils, what you do is you take these straight vegetable oils and you do what is known as a transesterification reaction to these straight vegetable oils to produce biodiesel, which has much better burning characteristics. Vegetable oils themselves are very viscous. They're also corrosive to the engines, and therefore we will convert them to biodiesel using a transesterification reaction. Vegetable oils basically contain what are known as triglycerides, which are these molecules that contain carbon chains between 16 and 18 carbons. So when I say carbon chain, this would be 16 carbons, an equal number of hydrogens to make it an alkane, and then C double bond O, and then this moiety is a glycerine moiety. It doesn't necessarily have to be that the second and third units, there are usually three carbon units in a triglyceride. That's why the word triglyceride. You can have 17 carbons in this one, you can have 20 carbons in this one. The number of carbons can either be equal or different in each of these chains. The reaction that we're talking about to make it a biodiesel is called a transesterification reaction. We use methanol to do the transesterification. Methanol alone, the reaction would take very long. Therefore, we use a catalyst, which is the base NaOH. Other catalysts have been investigated. Other things in place of methanol have also been investigated. So those are all topics of research. Once you do the transesterification reaction, what you're doing is you're breaking the triglyceride chains into three separate components, and so what you get is a methyl ester. So biodiesel is essentially a methyl ester. For those of you who are not familiar with what an ester is, we're looking for the C double bond O component, and that component makes it an ester. Ester are also these compounds that are found in perfumes and things like that because they are sweet smelling compounds. So the transesterification reaction takes a triglyceride which contains three of these components, breaks them up into separate methyl esters, and as a byproduct you get glycerin. Glycerin is sometimes also called glycerol. It's the same thing. Glycerol, glycerin, they're the same thing. And oftentimes what you do with glycerol or glycerin is that you can use it for other things. They're used in cosmetics and things like that. So you could use it separately for other uses. You could also incinerate it and use heat from it as another energy source. Now, whether biodiesel is a green fuel or a carbon neutral fuel depends upon where did the biodiesel come from, as is with everything else. The oil really depends upon where you live. So in the US, it would be really useful to have soybean oil because we are able to grow this in our local climate, in our local soil conditions. In places like Europe, rapeseed, which is also known as canola oil, is used. In places like Malaysia, etc., palm oil is used. Another consideration was was there before you started growing these types of vegetable oils to make this biodiesel. In places like Indonesia, what they have done, unfortunately, is that they have burned several acres of tropical forest in order to grow palm oil and make biodiesel. Um, Obviously, tropical forests sequester or store a lot of carbon in them, and palm oil is not that good of a storage of carbon. And therefore, what you have is that you have taken away something that was able to store a lot of carbon in the hopes of doing something that was renewable, that is biodiesel, but really the purpose of this has been destroyed. So, in a sense, if you're going to burn tropical forests, palm oil or the biodiesel derived thereof is no longer going to be carbon neutral. So, you need to look at the life cycle analysis or the entire cycle to make sure that something is carbon neutral or is indeed renewable. Biodiesel can also be used in blends. The designation is a B designation. Remember, for ethanol, the designation is an E designation. For methanol, the designation is an M designation. E10 corresponding to 10% ethanol, 90% gasoline. M10 corresponding to 10% methanol, 90% gasoline. So similarly, B10 would correspond to 10% biodiesel, 90% gasoline. Finally, instead of using vegetable oils as your source of triglycerides, or triglycerides are sometimes called as lipids, another is using algae. As you can see here, this is an alga farm. You can grow these in little plastic packets, and they're green in color. They're doing photosynthesis, and they have lipid content depending upon, or triglyceride content depending upon what type of algae you're looking at. The basic problem with algae is that growing them can be difficult, and the lipid triglyceride content can be different in different algae. So the research in this particular realm is how to modify these algae to produce a lot more lipids than they do right now, how to make them less fickle, etc. But once you have an algal farm going, the idea is that you can take the lipids or triglycerides, again do this transesterification reaction just like previously described, to produce biodiesel, which can then fuel your cars. The advantage of something like algae is that it is not a food crop, first of all, and second of all, it is not going to use land area, because as you can see here, it's grown in these plastic packets, and a lot of them are growing in a small area. The other advantage is you don't require water, you don't require fertilizer. So these are some of the things that you need for things like soy, for things like palm oil, etc. And so you're going to eliminate a lot of those disadvantages. And these types of things are called bioreactors, sometimes also called photo bioreactors. And I posted 2 articles based on algal biofuels. Go ahead and read them to get more of an idea of whether this is a feasible technology, and what are some of the disadvantages, or what are some of the challenges when it comes to things like algal biofuels, which look like they're good but may not be. Please take the quiz at the end of watching this lecture, and also reading all of the associated material. Also read the pages corresponding to this particular lecture are page 292 to about 309. So 292 to about 309. Some of the things that you want to pay attention to, table 7.1, which talks about the advantages and disadvantages of biodiesel and comparing it to petroleum. You also want to pay attention to the transesterification equation, because that is an important equation to keep in mind, and that is definitely something that is important. You also want to look at figure 7.2 and understand vapor pressure versus boiling point, and why ethanol is 100% cannot be used. That is also a very good question that you would need to understand. Other than that, I have nothing else. The other part of this chapter is solar energy, which we will discuss after after exam 1. As discussed before, exam 2 will be posted on Wednesday and it will be due on Monday. For this particular section, there is a quiz that you will complete by Wednesday. Thank you.